Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. This is Francois. I'm here with Roel. Hey Roel, how are you?
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And so here we're just going to have today a conversation about office Wi-Fi, right? Just to try to see how the pandemic affected, the Wi-Fi in the office and what it means for us in the future. And maybe we could also talk about, what it means for us finding solutions for people to be able to work from home in a reliable way. And maybe we can also open up the discussion and talk about, different type of designs that, we are working on. And nowadays, on my end, I found like I don't really do office Wi-Fi. I do more, more complex Wi-Fi design nowadays. And so maybe we can talk about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, because the pandemic has really changed the way people come into the office, right? So there's a lot of people who still work from home, and I think more and more people just want to work from home. They don't want to commute into the workplace. And so I see that some offices are they're trying to make their offices smaller now. Like I know someone who has their company has over 3,000 people. They all come into the office, but now they're making their space much smaller and saying, hey, if you want to go into the office, we're going to rent some space at WeWork. And so that changes things for enterprises who largely had everyone come in. And so does that affect us as Wi-Fi professionals? Because now we're not doing as much Wi-Fi design, right? In these big offices.
Yeah, you're right. So that I think that's one aspect of it. People working from home more and more, and I think like the pandemic kind of, jump started, or kind of shook our culture a little bit, and forced us to work from home. And then companies realized that it's working quite well. We're gonna use that moving forward, even after the pandemic, or we're gonna give the option. And like you said, that has an impact on the office space, less office space, or, downsizing, leveraging co-working space, like you said. And so on our end, we see less and less. Even before the pandemic, I don't think I did a lot of office Wi-Fi. I was trying to think about it this morning. The last time I probably did an office Wi-Fi was like strictly office. Obviously, when you do warehouse, they have offices, but strictly office corporate space, it was probably maybe 2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Even more than that, 2.5 years ago, I would say. So
wow.
Most of what I do is like, industrial environments, and universities and outdoors and, warehouses, factories. That's type of thing I usually do. So office Wi-Fi wasn't really something I would do very often to start with, but since the pandemic started, I haven't heard anyone contacted me to do office Wi-Fi. And I think there's two reasons for that. First of all, like you said, we have less and less office spaces being used. And second of all, I think that most people see, office Wi-Fi as something easy, I put that into quotations, right? Yeah. easy to do. And then they will either do it themselves or hire like an IT general company to do it for them, except if it's a very large company. So what I would usually find is people doing it themselves. It's cheaper, I guess. And then they would call us if they have an issue, type of thing.
Okay. Yeah, because I've had maybe just a few projects with the office where I'm either designing or fixing Wi-Fi, because I think there's two buckets. There's companies who just don't have anyone there. So I'm like the only one in their office, and I'm just validating some new installation, and they have plans to bring people back. And then there's other companies who just want to fix their Wi-Fi as or before people come back. So they still have the office space, but it's just still empty. So I'm the only one walking through, but they want to fix issues that they had before. So that way, when workers return, there's no issues, because they've had issues in the past. And so they're taking that opportunity to upgrade and redesign. So those are the only two scenarios I've seen. I haven't been in an office where everyone's there.
I think the one thing I've seen with one of my customers, and we may see more and more as people come back to the office, is, we may start to see problems with networks, office Wi-Fi, office Wi-Fi network that were not designed for capacity as people come back and start to go on Zoom calls all day long, right? Because the people used to have their meetings in person at the office, but now that we're in this hybrid model where half of the workspace is working from home, the other half at the office, maybe everyone at the office will go on Zoom. So if you have like open spaces with 50 people that do Zooms at the same time, the Wi-Fi is not designed for to handle this, then they may see some problem.
Yeah. And so with this in mind, like how does that affect people like us who work with Wi-Fi? Excuse me. And are we going to see less work in the office space, or are these people just going to try to do it themselves, right? Because maybe they have a smaller work, they've downsized, so the office is smaller.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the customer. Like when I look at, my customers, the smaller customers will usually try to do it themselves because, they can handle it, or it's cheaper, or whatever reason they have. But then the, large customer who have multiple locations across the country, then they may still have some requirements. And it depends on the industry, right? Some industries, they can work from home. Any web-based companies, they can do a lot from home.
Yeah.
But other industries, like, they may need to be on site and still use offices. So that's going to depend on that. But yeah, I think we might still be involved on some of the office Wi-Fi, depending on the industry. But another trend I see is, with the new set of tools we have nowadays, where we have more visibility on the network, and I'm thinking of solutions like Mist, where you could have really good metrics on how the Wi-Fi is doing. You could even have some sort of heat maps on of how the Wi-Fi is doing remotely. I think some companies they will rely on maybe for cooperative environments that are quite straightforward. Maybe they will rely on just like a predictive model or something like this, and maybe do less like work on site, and then rely on their tools or rely on some software to do some of the validation for them as they install the equipment. And we may get to a point where you deploy a network and you run a script and it tells you what's wrong, and then you fix it before putting it into production, to kind of speed everything up and automate the process. I think for those type of environments, it could be done. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to do that. I mean, you could do that if you have a very controlled environment. The clients, you've done some tests and all of this, and that makes me think of what Google does. Remember the presentation from Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, from WPC in Prague.
Yeah, so I think we could get there with some software tools to help us. But I personally think that if you're doing something like this, you're to the point where you know what you're doing, so you're doing it properly.
Yeah.
Because this week I was working on a report for a customer, and we're doing an assessment, and I was like, man, if only customers will just design properly the first time around, they will save so much time and money on those assessments and troubleshooting. And so on the other hand, it's very important to still do design, make sure that the critical devices you're going to deploy are going to operate properly, and that you're going to be able to use your applications properly. So I still think that designing is very important, and validating is also important. But maybe instead of doing multiple trip on site, maybe one trip at the end could be good enough.
But do you think they're just going to do predictive and they'll validate on their own? And that probably means not even using like Ekahau, for example. They'll just decide to validate using their devices, go around the office and test connectivity.
If I was to do something like this myself, I think I'll still use Ekahau. But then after you've done your survey, then you can run some scripts to validate, to validate a few things. You could validate AP location, for instance. If you have the Ekahau files, for the predictive model, maybe what you could do is once you've done the validation, you could compare based on the AP names if the AP has been installed roughly at the right location. You could validate, a few things as well. Make sure all the equipment is up. I don't know. I haven't put too much thoughts into it, but I'm sure a few things could be validated on top of the user experience, like you said.
Yeah.
For me, that's for when I do validation, that's the most important, because like I've said before, we don't design Wi-Fi network for us. We do it for the users. So what's important is that the user is able to use, their devices to do what they're supposed to do without any problem. So that's what I try to focus on when I validate the network. So the ACAO survey is great to kind of document, measure everything, and have everything documented so you can double check the technical aspect of it. But then the validation from the user's devices and using the user's applications are very important to make sure the network is ready.
But do you think people, these companies who are downsizing their offices and the IT people there, do you think they'll find value into purchasing design software, validation software like Ekahau or others? Because I know that the price of those it's not an inexpensive tool, and maybe they're only need it once. So this is this is probably a problem even today or previously, where people just don't get the software and they go, that's too expensive. We'll just kind of wing it, roll it out ourselves, and adjust if we need to.
Yeah,
because that's what I see happening.
They could they could hire someone to do a validation for them. Someone who has the tools, right?
That's true. Yeah, they could hire someone.
Or what would be nice is having some sort of software as a service where you can get it for the time you need
just for the day or two that you need it to design. Or there's other solutions too they'll probably look for more inexpensive software, because again they'll look at how often they need to do this, how much is is it to acquire these tools, because I don't see them purchasing a Sidekick just for that one survey. But yeah, if they can find someone to partner with that'll do it for them, I think that would definitely help. But again, it's like when people are downsizing offices, I guess there'll be less work doing offices, and most of those designs, I think, especially if the office is small, they'll just kind of guess where to put the APs, right? And I've seen one of my clients actually downsize from like a 2-story office to just like a single story, and it downsized all the way down to like a square shape. And when I looked at it, because they asked me about design, I was like, I think you guys could have designed this yourselves. It's so small that it's so small you could actually guess and be correct with the AP placement as long as they didn't overdo it. But it's one of those, like, I was like, I see the trends where people are downsizing quite a bit. And like you, I've been mainly in more complex environments because that's what's ramping up more than the office space.
Yeah, for me, it's, office spaces, it's, I would consider that like a more easier design. You could, AP installation is, well, it depends the environment, but usually you could install it under the drop-down ceiling.
Yeah.
If they have like open ceiling, then you have to find other solutions, but it's usually pretty straightforward. Compared to, installing it in industrial environment where you have to document every AP installations and use external antennas and so on.
Yeah,
so
and
for
I think
the most part, yeah, it's easier.
Yeah, because all they have to do is really nail the AP placement, make sure there's no objects in front of it or something that would block the signal. And then the other thing I see is they have too many access points, right? But if they're downsizing and they have access points already, they're just going to reuse those. They just have to make sure they don't overpopulate the space with APs. But at least from there, if they engage somebody for troubleshooting, you can just turn off access points and it would still work in their scenario, right? And most likely the case is it'll still probably work. It's just some fine tuning.
Yeah. And then what companies could do is they could engage someone for the validation. So even if it's, they design it themselves and they install the equipment themselves, they could hire someone to come and do a validation, a survey, making sure signal is good everywhere, meeting the requirements. And then if, like you said, if tweaks needs to be made, then you can do it at that time and adjust the network. So that's a possibility as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is interesting because usually people like to hire someone to design but not to validate.
Yeah,
that would be the other way around.
Yeah, usually I see design being skipped and it'll be a validation or troubleshooting, one of those two.
Yeah, when design is skipped, troubleshooting is coming.
It's mostly troubleshooting. I've had people. So for the return to office portion, I have been engaged for things like, hey, we just want to make sure the signal is everywhere kind of thing. We don't have coverage holes. So I'll do a validation survey. But of course, if no one's in the office, everything looks good. As long as usually there's no coverage holes. But when I'm testing it, Wi-Fi always looks good. And when I'm in San Francisco, I mean, there's a lot of networks everywhere, but with most of those offices empty, the Wi-Fi performs very well. Mm-hmm. So it's the return when everyone comes back. That's when we might see issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's an interesting case. And so I guess what do you think, Francois? Do you think we'll see an increase in office Wi-Fi? Are we going to see that come back to how it was pre-pandemic, or do you think things have changed and it's going to be different?
Well, for most industries, I think it has changed. Mentality has changed. So we may not see it as big as what it used to be. And it might also depend on the country and the culture, right?
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, mentality has changed, and then more and more people are going to work from home, which means less office, less people in the office. And then I was going to say something, but I forgot. Yeah, no, I was going to say in my own world, I don't see a lot of office Wi-Fi anyway. But so I don't think it's going to change too much for me. except if I get new customers and they need Wi-Fi in offices. Most of the offices I do, it's offices attached to a warehouse or a plant or something like that.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so I'm in agreement with you. I see office spaces declining for Wi-Fi. So just maybe smaller installations, deployments, especially in the larger cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, like maybe less of those because there's less people that want to go into the office. I think that's going to drive a lot of it is people who want to work from home. So I'll probably, what I predict is more of a shift towards helping make people's home Wi-Fi better, because there's a lot of people you can tell when they're on Zoom, it's like horrible quality video, or they're cutting out, and probably moving more towards security since people is working from home. So from there, it's like, okay, how do we improve home Wi-Fi so they're not just using, like a Netgear or Linksys? Maybe something. Maybe people will take their enterprise APs and give some of those to their users. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that I think can work pretty well. First, it's the most internet providers nowadays, they also have options for additional pods that can extend your coverage in your house, and I've seen them work pretty well in a house environment, as long as the pods are not too far from one another. So if employees are kind of educated on that and get them, and maybe they can have better coverage in their offices. That can kind of work, and then they would use VPN, I guess, from their machine to VPN back to the office. So that would be like, I guess, for the enterprise level, the cheapest solution. But like you said, I also like the idea of having APs sent to the employees. The small wall-mounted APs. And then you can set them up so they can VPN back to the environment, the enterprise environment, and they can start broadcasting your corporate SSID in the house, so people could have them in the house, in the office, and then they could connect to the Wi-Fi and have a good connection. And then the only thing you don't control is their internet connection, right? You could have someone with a very poor internet connection, but what can you do about that? Right?
I even think that VPN is probably not as needed anymore. What I see is like the APs having a VPN connection back to the office, and then maybe the SSID traffic leaves from the office. But I mean, with everything mostly access in the cloud, that's probably all we need, right? But I don't know, it depends on the business requirements.
Yeah, and then more and more applications that we use are web-based, right?
Yeah.
So we could think of it as Wi-Fi as a service as well, right? You're just shipping an AP to someone's place, and then that AP connects back to the cloud somewhere, and then the traffic is tunneled back into the enterprise network. And like you said, you don't even need a VPN anymore. You can just connect to that SSID and get access to whichever enterprise data is still in the data center.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Not in the cloud anymore.
Yeah. So I think that's where the transition will probably go towards less people in the office, more working from home or from anywhere, as long as they can get to the application they need to.
More and more cloud services being used.
Yep. Yeah. More and more cloud. Maybe everyone moving who hasn't moved to the cloud will move now. So I guess that's a poll for the audience here. Do you think that carpeted office Wi-Fi will be less needed? If you head over to cleartosend.net/277, let us know in the comments like what you're seeing. I know it's gonna like Francois said, it's gonna be different for each country, probably for each city as well, and states. But what are you guys seeing? Are you guys seeing less office Wi-Fi, or are you seeing that pick up again? Be interested to know.
Yeah, one thing that I said about that we may see is more and more, video conferencing traffic at the office that could cause problem. We'll see.
All right. Just wanted to put that idea out there and see if that's the same trend everyone is seeing, and let us know what that means for you as well. We're interested to know if Wi-Fi for offices is on the decline, and maybe there's something else that's coming up, whether it's warehouses or some other environment. Head over to cleartosend.net/277 and let us know in the comment section. But we do want to thank you guys for listening.
So the question is office Wi-Fi dead? That's the question.
Is office Wi-Fi dead?
Okay, we can end on that. That's perfect.
All right. Thank you, guys.
See you guys.